A little girl fell into a well, alone, and no one even noticed. But it was the family's goat who saw it all and did something unbelievable. The ending of this story will give you goosebumps. And if you love true stories that feel like a movie, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next ones. The old Harrington family homestead had always been a sanctuary. Nestled at the foot of the silent Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia, surrounded by abundant vegetation, tall trees, and even deeper memories, the place carried stories passed down through generations. During extended weekends, it was customary for the grandparents, James and Martha Harrington, to gather their children, daughters-in-law, sons-in-law, and grandchildren to celebrate the small joys of rural life. Bread baked in a wood-fired oven, outdoor games, the smell of fresh grass, and the simplicity that only the countryside offers. The property had been in the family for over a century, witnessing the ebb and flow of American history from a quiet distance. The main house, a two-story colonial structure with a wide front porch and weather-beaten white paint, stood as a testament to enduring family bonds. Behind it stretched acres of gently rolling meadows, bordered by dense woods that climbed up the mountainside. Among all the elements that made up this family setting, there was one that stood out not for its grandeur, but for the affection it inspired, a goat named Daisy. Adopted by chance after being rejected by a breeder in the region, Daisy was small, with light-colored fur and curious eyes. From the first day she set foot on the property, she demonstrated remarkably gentle behavior. Over time, she began to circulate freely among family members, sleeping around the house, following the footsteps of whoever fed her, and especially creating an almost inexplicable bond with the youngest granddaughter, Lily. Lily, just 6 years old, was the smallest of the bunch. She had wild, curly red hair, freckles scattered across her nose, and eyes that reflected the clear Virginia sky. She seemed to have a silent language with the animal, built on touch and presence. The goat, who had received the affectionate name of Daisy, had become part of the family, being treated with respect and even a certain reverence, especially by the elders, who said that animals like her seemed to know more than they showed. "That goat has an old soul," Grandpa James would often say, stroking his silver beard as he watched Lily and Daisy walking together along the edge of the meadow. "Reminds me of a dog my father had when I was a boy. That animal could sense a storm coming 3 days early." The Harrington family gatherings had become less frequent over the years as the younger generation scattered across the country pursuing careers and building lives of their own. Sarah, James, and Martha's eldest daughter had moved to Seattle with her husband Tom and their 3 children. Their son Michael lived in Chicago with his wife Elena and their twins. Only Rebecca, their youngest daughter, had stayed somewhat local, living 2 hours away in Richmond with her husband David and their daughter Lily. This particular weekend was special. It marked Martha's 70th birthday, and for the occasion, the entire family had made the journey back to the homestead. The house buzzed with activity as 3 generations moved through its rooms, filling the space with laughter and conversation that had been absent for too long. "Mom, where did you put Lily's allergy medicine?" Rebecca called from upstairs, rummaging through a suitcase. "Check the side pocket," David answered from the porch, where he was helping James repair a loose railing. Martha stood in the kitchen, rolling out dough for her famous apple pie, while her daughters-in-law unpacked groceries and grandchildren darted in and out, slamming the screen door despite repeated warnings not to. "Easy on that door, Lucas," Sarah called to her 10-year-old son. "You're going to break it clean off the hinges." "Sorry, Mom," came the distant reply as the boy disappeared around the corner of the house, followed by his cousins. Only Lily remained indoors, sitting quietly at the kitchen table, her small legs swinging beneath her as she watched the women prepare dinner. Every few minutes her eyes would drift to the window, where Daisy could be seen grazing contentedly in the side yard. "Grandma," Lily asked, her voice soft, "how old is Daisy?" Martha smiled, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Well, let's see. She came to us about 4 years ago and she was just a kid then, a baby goat that is, so I reckon she's around 5. That's almost as old as me, Lily observed seriously. That's right, sweetheart. You two have grown up together in a way. Daisy understands what I say, Lily stated with the absolute certainty that only children possess. When I'm sad, she puts her head on my lip. Rebecca exchanged a knowing smile with her mother. Lily and that goat are inseparable when we visit. I swear, if we had the space in Richmond, I'd have given in and gotten her one of her own by now. The afternoon stretched on lazily, with the adults alternating between catching up on family news and tackling the minor repairs that always seemed to accumulate between visits. James and his sons climbed up to the roof to fix a leak that had developed during the winter, while Martha and the women prepared enough food to feed a small army. The old fence by the well needs replacing, James mentioned as they gathered for lunch on the porch. Been meaning to do it last summer, but never got around to it. We can take a look at it tomorrow, Michael offered, passing a bowl of mashed potatoes to his sister. That old well's been nothing but trouble since your grandfather's time, Martha commented. Should have been properly filled in years ago. It's part of the property's history, James defended. Besides, it's all boarded up now. Nobody goes near it anyway. As the day began to wind down and the golden late afternoon light filtered through the trees, the family settled into the comfortable rhythm of shared meals and stories told around the kitchen table. Lily, who had been unusually quiet during dinner, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, I can't find Daisy," she whispered. Concern creasing her small brow, David ruffled her hair affectionately. "She's probably just wandering around the yard, honey. Goats like to explore, remember. We'll look for her after dinner." Lily nodded reluctantly, but her eyes kept drifting to the darkening window. Something felt wrong. Daisy always came up to the porch around dinner time, hoping for scraps. It wasn't like her to disappear. "Can I go look for her now?" Lily asked again after a few minutes, her plate barely touched. Rebecca sighed. "Lily, it's getting dark. We'll help you find Daisy in the morning." "But what if she's lost?" Lily's voice trembled slightly. "What if she needs me?" James caught his granddaughter's eye across the table and saw the genuine worry there. "Tell you what," he said, setting down his napkin. "Let's you and I take a quick look around the yard before it gets completely dark. Just a quick one, mind you." Relief washed over Lily's face as she scrambled down from her chair. "Thank you, Grandpa." As they stepped out onto the porch, the last rays of sunlight were disappearing behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the property. James took Lily's small hand in his weathered one, and together they made their way around the house, calling Daisy's name. The evening air was cool and still, carrying their voices across the yard. "Daisy! Here, girl!" James called, though he felt slightly foolish calling a goat like one would a dog. Lily's calls were more insistent, tinged with growing worry. "Daisy, where are you? It's me, Lily." They circled the barn and checked the small goat shelter James had built years ago, but there was no sign of the small white goat. Just as James was about to suggest they return to the house and resume the search in the morning, a distant bleat caught their attention. "Did you hear that?" Lily gasped, her grip tightening on James's hand. They stood perfectly still, listening. Again, the sound came. A bleating call that seemed to be coming from the direction of the old orchard, beyond the far meadow. It was not the normal sound Daisy made. This was higher-pitched, almost frantic. "Grandpa, that's Daisy! She sounds scared!" Lily pulled at his hand, trying to lead him toward the sound. James frowned, suddenly uneasy. The orchard was quite a distance from the house, and beyond it lay the old trail that led to the abandoned well. No one had been down that path in years. "Lily, I think we should go back and get your dad and uncle to help us look. It's getting too dark now." But Lily's worried expression had hardened into determination. Daisy needs us now, Grandpa. I can hear it in her voice. As another urgent bleat echoed across the darkening landscape, James made a decision that would set in motion a chain of events none of them could have anticipated. Instead of turning back toward the warmth and safety of the house, he tightened his grip on Lily's hand and started toward the sound of the distressed goat, unaware that the night ahead would change their family forever. The path to the orchard was overgrown with tall grass that brushed against James's legs as they walked. The twilight had deepened, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. James wished he had thought to bring a flashlight, but turning back now seemed impossible with Lily so determined and Daisy's bleats growing more insistent. "We'll just check the orchard quickly," James told Lily, trying to keep his voice steady. "If we don't find Daisy right away, we're heading back to get help." Lily nodded solemnly, but her eyes remained fixed on the darkening path ahead. The old apple trees loomed like shadowy sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching toward the first emerging stars. "Daisy!" Lily called again, her voice small against the vastness of the evening. "Where are you?" As they reached the edge of the orchard, the bleating suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was somehow more unsettling than the distressed calls had been. James felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling night air. "Maybe she's moved," he suggested, straining his eyes to see through the deepening darkness. "Let's walk a little further, but stay close to me, Lily." They moved slowly between the ancient apple trees, some still bearing fruit despite years of neglect. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, littered with fallen apples in various stages of decay. The sweet, sour smell of fermenting fruit hung in the air. "Grandpa, look!" Lily suddenly pointed ahead, where a patch of white was just visible. In the gloom, "It's Daisy!" Before James could tighten his grip, Lily had pulled away from him and darted forward. The goat stood at the far edge of the orchard, where the trees gave way to a narrow trail that James knew led toward the old well. Daisy was pacing back and forth, her movements agitated and unnatural. "Lily, wait!" James called, hurrying after his granddaughter. "Don't run ahead!" But Lily had already reached Daisy and was kneeling beside the goat, examining her with concern. "She's shaking, Grandpa. I think she's scared." James caught up, slightly winded. "Let me see her." He knelt beside the animal, running his hands over her small frame. Daisy seemed physically unharmed, but her behavior was odd. Instead of settling down now that they had found her, she continued to bleat and butt her head gently against Lily's legs, as if trying to push the child in a particular direction. "She wants us to follow her," Lily said with absolute certainty. James straightened up, feeling uneasy. The path beyond the orchard was barely visible now in the gathering darkness, a ribbon of deeper black winding through the landscape. He knew it led eventually to the old well, a place that had been sealed off years ago after being deemed unsafe. "We need to take her back to the house," James said firmly. "It's too dark to be wandering around out here." He reached for Daisy's collar, but the goat dodged his grasp and trotted a few paces down the trail, then turned back to look at them expectantly. When neither human followed, she let out another urgent bleat and moved a few steps further. "See, she wants us to come," Lily insisted, already following the goat. "Lily, stop right there," James said, using his rarely employed stern grandfather voice. "That path leads to the old well. It's not safe, especially in the dark." Lily hesitated, torn between obedience and her concern for Daisy. "But what if something's wrong? What if she's trying to show us something important?" As if to emphasize the child's point, Daisy bleated again, more frantically than before. There was something in that sound that gave James pause. In his 73 years, he had spent enough time around animals to know when one was trying to communicate something. "Urgent." "All right," he conceded reluctantly. "We'll follow her a little way, but you stay right beside me and hold my hand the entire time." Lily's small hand slipped back into his, and together they began to follow Daisy down the narrow trail. The goat seemed to understand that they were, finally heeding her call, and moved ahead with purpose, occasionally looking back to ensure they were still following. The trail wound through a small wooded area that separated the orchard from the clearing where the old well stood. The trees here grew close together, creating a tunnel of darkness. James wished fervently that he had his phone with him, but like many men of his generation, he often left the device behind, especially during family gatherings. "It's spooky here," Lily whispered, pressing closer to his side. "We're almost through," James assured her, though he was beginning to seriously question the wisdom of this expedition. "Just a little further and then we're turning back. Daisy or no Daisy." The goat had disappeared momentarily around a bend in the path. When they rounded the same corner, they saw her standing in a small clearing up ahead, illuminated by a shaft of moonlight that had broken through the clouds. The clearing was familiar to James. It was where the old well stood. "That's far. Enough," James said firmly. "We're not going near that well." But Daisy wasn't near the well. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, her attention focused on something in the underbrush. As they watched, she pawed at the ground and bleated. Again, this time with such urgency that James felt compelled to investigate, despite his better judgment. "Stay here," he told Lily, releasing her hand. "I'm just going to see what's got her so worked up, and then we're heading straight back." Lily nodded, wrapping her arms around herself in the cooling night air. James approached Daisy cautiously, aware that the ground here could be uneven and potentially dangerous. As he drew closer, he saw that the goat was standing beside what appeared to be a small sinkhole, partially hidden by ferns and low bushes. "What have you found, girl?" James murmured, kneeling carefully to examine the depression in the ground. That's when he heard it. A sound so faint he might have imagined it. A small, whimpering cry that seemed to be coming from beneath the earth itself. James froze, his heart suddenly pounding in his chest. "Hello?" he called, leaning closer to the hole. "Is someone there?" The whimpering came again, slightly louder this time. It was a child's voice. "Grandpa?" Lily called from where he'd left her. "What's happening?" "Stay there, Lily," James called back, his voice sharper than he intended. His mind was racing. How could someone be down there? The old well was supposed to be covered and sealed, located several yards away in the center of the clearing. Unless... James remembered his father talking about the well having a side tunnel, an attempt by some long-ago ancestor to create a rudimentary irrigation system for the orchard. Could this sinkhole be connected to that tunnel? And if so, who was down there? With growing dread, James called out again, "Hello? Can you hear me? Who's down there?" The response was weak, but clear enough to send ice through his veins. "Help! I fell. I can't get out." It was a child's voice. A boy. James turned toward Lily, who was still obediently waiting where he'd left her. "Lily, come here quickly, but be very careful where you step." As she approached cautiously, James's mind raced through the possibilities. All the children had been accounted for at dinner, hadn't they? He tried to remember if anyone had mentioned one of the grandchildren missing, but the answer was clear. No one had raised an alarm. Everyone had been present at the table, except for Lucas, James said suddenly, remembering Sarah's 10-year-old son who had run outside after lunch. Had anyone seen him since? With the house full of people and activities, it was easy for one child to go temporarily unnoticed. "Is that Lucas down there?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with fear as she reached James's side. James leaned closer to the hole. "Lucas, is that you, son?" "Grandpa?" The voice was definitely Lucas's, though tinged with pain and fear. "I was chasing a rabbit. The ground just opened up. I think my leg is hurt." James felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. Lucas had apparently been trapped for hours, and no one had noticed his absence. With the family gathering and so many people coming and going, each adult had probably assumed the boy was with someone else. "Lucas, we're going to get you out," James called, trying to keep his voice calm and reassuring. "Are you hurt badly?" My leg. Lucas's voice broke. And it's really cold down here, Grandpa. James turned to Lily. Sweetheart, I need you to be very brave right now. We need help to get Lucas out safely. You need to run back to the house as fast as you can and tell your parents and Uncle Michael to come right away. Tell them to bring ropes, flashlights, and first aid supplies. Lily's eyes widened with fear. But it's dark. I don't want to go alone. Daisy will go with you, James said, surprising himself with the suggestion. But as if understanding the situation perfectly, the goat moved to Lily's side and nudged her gently back toward the path. Really? She'll show me the way? Yes, James said with more confidence than he felt. Daisy knows the way home. Just follow her and run as fast as you can. Lucas is counting on you. Lily hesitated for just a moment, then nodded with determination. I'll be really fast, Grandpa. I promise. That's my brave girl. Now go. James watched as Lily and Daisy disappeared back down the path, the goat seeming to understand the urgency of their mission. He turned back to the sinkhole, lying flat on his stomach to get closer to the opening. Lucas, help is on the way. I need you to stay awake and keep talking to me. Can you do that? Yes, Grandpa, came the shaky reply. Is everyone looking for me? James swallowed hard. The truth was that until now, no one had realized the boy was missing. How could they have been so careless? Everyone will be here soon, he assured his grandson. Just hold on a little longer. As he maintained a steady stream of encouragement to the trapped boy, James found himself silently thanking Daisy. Without the goat's persistence, Lucas might have remained undiscovered until morning, or worse. The night was growing colder, and the boy was already showing signs of hypothermia. James glanced up at the stars now visible in the clearing sky, and sent up a silent prayer that Lily would make it back to the house safely and quickly. Lucas's life might depend on how soon help arrived, and as he turned his attention back to comforting his grandson, James couldn't help but wonder at the remarkable intuition of a simple farm animal who had somehow known exactly where to lead them in their moment of greatest need. Lily had never run so hard in her life. The path seemed longer and darker on the return journey, branches reaching out like grasping fingers in the moonlight. But true to James's prediction, Daisy stayed with her, sometimes leading the way, sometimes nudging her from behind when she hesitated at a particularly dark stretch of trail. We have to hurry, Daisy, Lily panted, her small legs pumping as fast as they could go. Lucas needs us. The goat bleated in what sounded almost like agreement, trotting alongside the child with determined steps. When they finally emerged from the orchard into the open meadow, Lily could see the lights of the farmhouse in the distance, a beacon of warmth and safety that gave her renewed energy. She sprinted across the field, Daisy keeping pace beside her. Back at the house, the adults had just begun to notice the prolonged absence of James and Lily. They've been gone too long, Rebecca said, pacing the living room. It's completely dark out now. Your father knows this property like the back of his hand, Martha reassured her, though her own eyes kept straying to the window. They probably just got distracted looking for that goat. David stood by the back door, peering into the darkness. I'm going to go look for them. It's not like Dad to stay out this late with Lily. As he reached for his jacket, the back door burst open, and Lily tumbled in, breathless and wide-eyed, Daisy right behind her. Lucas, she gasped, doubling over to catch her breath. Lucas fell by the old well. Grandpa's with him. The room erupted into chaos. Sarah leapt to her feet with a cry of alarm. What do you mean Lucas fell? Where is my son? Her voice was sharp with fear. Lily pointed in the direction she had come from. There's a hole in the ground, near the well. Lucas is trapped inside. Grandpa sent me to get help. Michael was already pulling on his boots. How badly is he hurt? How deep is the hole? I don't know, Lily said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Grandpa told me to tell you to bring ropes and flashlights and first aid stuff. David knelt before his daughter, gripping her shoulders gently. You did exactly right, Lily. You're very brave. Within minutes, the men had gathered supplies, coils of rope, powerful flashlights, the extensive first aid kit Martha kept stocked, and even an old ladder from the barn. Sarah, despite protests that she should stay with Martha, and the other children insisted on coming along. "He's my son," she said firmly, her face pale but determined. "I'm coming." Rebecca hugged Lily close. "You stay here with Grandma and help her with the other kids, okay? We'll bring Lucas back safe." But Lily pulled away, her small face set in a stubborn expression that her mother knew all too well. "I have to show you the way. It's hard to find in the dark." "I know where the old well is," Michael argued, impatient to get moving. "But the hole isn't by the well," Lily insisted. "It's hidden. You won't find it without me." The adults exchanged glances, knowing she was right. Time was too precious to waste searching blindly. "She comes with us to show the way, then one of us brings her straight back," David decided. Rebecca nodded reluctantly. "Be careful, baby." Martha hugged Lily quickly. "You're a hero already, sweetheart, just like Daisy." At the mention of the goat, everyone noticed the animal still standing patiently by the door, as if waiting for them. "That goat," Martha said, softly. "James always said she was special." The rescue party set out into the night, Lily and Daisy leading the way with David and Michael carrying the ladder and equipment. Sarah and Elena followed close behind, their faces tense with worry. The beam of their flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the path that Lily had traversed twice already that evening. "How much further?" Sarah asked after they had been walking for what seemed like an eternity. "Almost there," Lily assured her, though her own legs were beginning to tire. Daisy stayed close, occasionally looking back at the adults as if to urge them to hurry. When they finally reached the clearing, they found James still lying flat on his stomach beside the sinkhole, talking steadily to Lucas. "Help's here, son," he called down, the relief evident in his voice, as the flashlight beams swept the area. Sarah rushed forward, nearly sliding into the hole herself in her haste. David caught her arm just in time. "Careful, the ground around it might not be stable." Michael directed his flashlight into the opening, revealing a narrow shaft that dropped about 12 feet into what appeared to be a horizontal tunnel. At the bottom, Lucas was huddled against the earthen wall, his face streaked with dirt and tears, one leg stretched out at an awkward angle. "Mom," he called up, his voice small and frightened. "I'm here, baby," Sarah choked out, forcing herself to sound calmer than she felt. "We're going to get you out right now." Michael was already assessing the situation with a critical eye. "The opening's too narrow for an adult to go down safely. We need to widen it first. And that tunnel looks like it could collapse any minute," David added grimly. "We need to be extremely careful." They worked quickly, using the shovels they had brought to carefully widen the opening without causing a further cave-in. James, exhausted from his vigil, was helped to a nearby tree where he sat with Lily, watching anxiously. "How did you find him?" David asked as they worked. "If you'd been even a few feet away, you might never have heard him." James gestured toward Daisy, who was standing alertly at the edge of the activity, watching every move. "It was the goat. She led us right to this spot. Wouldn't take no for an answer." David paused, looking at the animal with newfound respect. "You're kidding." "I've never been more serious," James replied. "That goat knew exactly where Lucas was, almost like she was listening for him somehow." They were interrupted by Michael's shout. "I think the opening's wide enough now. We need to lower someone down." The decision was made quickly. Elena, being the smallest adult and trained as a nurse, would be lowered into the hole with a harness they had improvised from the ropes. She would assess Lucas's condition and secure him for extraction. "Be careful," Michael told his wife, helping her into the makeshift harness. "If anything feels unstable down there, we pull you both up immediately." Elena nodded, her face set with determination. With Sarah and David holding the ropes and Michael guiding her descent, she was slowly lowered into the hole. The minutes that followed were tense, with only Elena's occasional updates calling up from below. His right leg is broken, but it's a clean break. He's very cold and a bit confused, likely mild hypothermia. We need to get him out as quickly as possible. Working with practiced efficiency, Elena splinted Lucas's leg using supplies from the first aid kit and secured him to the harness. Then came the most delicate part of the operation, lifting the injured boy through the narrow opening without causing further injury or triggering a collapse. Pull slowly, Elena instructed from below. Any sudden movements could bring down more soil. The extraction was agonizingly slow, with everyone holding their breath as Lucas was gradually raised through the opening. Sarah stood ready to receive her son, tears streaming freely down her face now. When Lucas finally emerged into the moonlight, there was a collective sigh of relief. Sarah gathered him carefully into her arms, mindful of his injured leg. "My brave boy," she whispered, holding him close. "You're safe now." But the ordeal wasn't over yet. Elena still needed to be brought up, and suddenly the ground around the opening began to shift ominously. "It's collapsing," Michael shouted. "Elena, grab the rope, now!" There was a heart-stopping moment when it seemed the entire side of the hole might give way, burying Elena beneath tons of soil and rock. David and Michael pulled frantically on the rope, and with a final heave, Elena was yanked through the opening, just as a large section of the tunnel collapsed behind her. The sound of falling earth continued for several seconds, then faded to silence. Everyone stood frozen, horrified by the close call. If Lucas had remained down there even minutes longer. "We need to get him to a hospital," Elena said, breaking the spell as she quickly checked Lucas's vital signs again. "His temperature is dangerously low, and that leg needs proper medical attention." The journey back to the farmhouse was slow but urgent, with David and Michael carefully carrying Lucas on a makeshift stretcher fashioned from the ladder and blankets. Sarah walked alongside, holding her son's hand and murmuring words of comfort. James followed with Lily, both exhausted but relieved. And throughout it all, Daisy stayed with them, sometimes leading the way through particularly dark stretches of the path, almost as if she were guiding them home. By the time they reached the farmhouse, Martha had already called for an ambulance and was waiting anxiously on the porch. The other children had been settled into bed, though it was doubtful any of them were actually sleeping with all the commotion. "They're 5 minutes out," Martha reported as they carried Lucas inside and laid him on the sofa. She had already prepared hot water bottles and warm blankets, which Elena immediately put to use, combating Lucas's hypothermia. In the relative safety and warmth of the living room, the full impact of what had happened began to sink in. Lucas could have been trapped in that tunnel all night, or worse, been buried alive when it eventually collapsed. If not for Daisy's strange behavior and insistent bleating. "That goat saved his life," James said quietly to Martha, as they watched the paramedics who had finally arrived examine Lucas. "She knew exactly where he was, led us right to him." Martha squeezed her husband's hand. "Animals sense things we can't. My grandmother used to say some creatures see with more than their eyes." As Lucas was carefully loaded onto a gurney for transport to the hospital, Sarah paused to look around the room. "Where's the goat?" she asked suddenly. I need to thank her." Everyone looked around, but Daisy was nowhere to be seen. In the commotion of the ambulance arrival, no one had noticed her slip away. "She was just here," Lily said, confusion clear in her tired voice. "Where did she go?" David went to the back door and peered out into the darkness. "I don't see her anywhere." "We can look for her tomorrow," James said, placing a comforting hand on Lily's shoulder. "She's probably just spooked by all the activity." But as Sarah climbed into the ambulance with Lucas and the rest of the family prepared to follow in their cars, there was an unspoken question hanging in the air, one that would grow more pressing in the days to come. How had Daisy known? What connection did this simple farm animal have to Lucas that allowed her to sense his peril and lead the family to his rescue? The answers would prove more extraordinary than any of them could have imagined, challenging their understanding of the bond between humans and animals, and revealing secrets about their family history that had remained buried for generations. The hospital waiting room buzzed with the low hum of fluorescent lights and hushed conversations. The Harrington family had taken over an entire corner, their exhausted faces showing the strain of the night's events. Lucas had been immediately taken for X-rays and treatment, with only Sarah allowed to accompany him. The rest of the family could do nothing but wait, the adrenaline of the rescue now fading into bone-deep fatigue. Rebecca sat with Lily, who had finally succumbed to sleep on her mother's lap. James and Martha sat hand in hand, their weathered faces bearing matching expressions of concern. Michael paced the floor, while Elena spoke quietly with a nurse she knew from professional conferences. David had gone to get coffee for everyone, though it was already past midnight. Family of Lucas Harrington. A doctor in blue scrubs appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Everyone straightened up immediately, and Michael stepped forward. "That's us. I'm his uncle. How is he?" "He's going to be fine," the doctor reassured them with a small smile. "The fracture was clean. We've set the bone and cast the leg. He's suffering from mild hypothermia and dehydration, but we're treating those as well. He's a lucky young man. A few more hours in that situation, and things could have been much worse." Sarah emerged from the treatment area, looking exhausted but relieved. "He's asking for everyone, especially Lily and Grandpa James." James stood up, joints creaking in protest after the long night. "Is it all right if we see him?" The doctor nodded. "Briefly, he needs rest, but a short family visit won't hurt. Just a few at a time, please." James gently woke Lily, whose eyes flew open with immediate concern. "Is Lucas okay?" "He's fine, sweetheart," Rebecca assured her. "Do you want to come see him?" Lily nodded vigorously, suddenly wide awake. James, Martha, and Lily followed. Sarah back to Lucas's room, while the others agreed to wait their turn. Lucas lay in the hospital bed, his right leg elevated and encased in a white cast. Despite his ordeal, he managed a weak smile when he saw his grandparents and cousin. "There's our brave boy," Martha said, moving to his bedside and smoothing his hair back from his forehead in that timeless grandmother gesture. "I wasn't very brave," Lucas admitted, his voice small. "I was really scared down there." "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared," James told him, settling into the chair beside the bed. "It means doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. You kept calling for help. You stayed awake. You fought to hold on. That's bravery." Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "I thought nobody would find me. It was so dark, and I kept thinking about what would happen if... But we did find you," Lily piped up, climbing carefully onto the foot of the bed. "Because of Daisy." Lucas looked confused. "Daisy? The goat?" Sarah explained how Daisy had led James and Lily to the exact spot where Lucas had fallen, how the goat had seemed to know precisely where to go and had been insistent about leading them there. But how could she know? Lucas wondered. "I didn't even know where I was." James shook his head. "That's something we've all been wondering. Animals have instincts we don't fully understand." "It's like she heard me," Lucas said thoughtfully. "When I was down there, I kept thinking about home and everyone at the farm. I even thought about Daisy, wondering if she would miss me if I didn't come back." The adults exchanged glances over Lucas's head, a silent acknowledgement of how close they had come to tragedy. "Well, thanks to Daisy, you're here with us," Martha said firmly. "And when we get you home, that goat is getting all the treats she could ever want. The conversation shifted to lighter topics: the upcoming school year, the cast that would need to be signed by everyone, the special treatment Lucas would get while recovering. No one mentioned the collapsed tunnel or the what-ifs that hung heavy in the air. After a while, the nurse came in to shoo them out, insisting that Lucas needed rest. They took turns saying goodnight, with Lily giving her cousin a careful hug before hopping down from the bed. "Good thing Daisy's so stubborn," Lucas told Lily as she was leaving. "Just like you," Lily grinned. "Grandma says we're two peas in a pod." Back in the waiting room, the family decided to take shifts. Sarah would stay overnight with Lucas, while the others would return to the farm to get some rest and come back. In the morning, the drive back was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the night's events. When they arrived at the farmhouse, the first thing Lily did was look for Daisy. Despite her exhaustion, she called for the goat, checking the yard and the small shelter James had built years ago. But there was no sign of the animal. "Maybe she's in the barn," David suggested, though he knew Daisy rarely went there, preferring to stay close to the house. A quick check of the barn yielded nothing. By now, everyone was too tired to mount a proper search, so they reluctantly agreed to look for Daisy in the morning. Lily finally allowed herself to be put to bed, but not before making her parents promise to wake her the moment Daisy was found. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the drama of the previous night. After a quick breakfast, the family split up to search for Daisy. David and Michael took the truck to check the far pastures, while Rebecca and Elena searched the wooded areas closer to the house. Martha stayed behind to prepare food for Lucas and Sarah at the hospital, and James took Lily to check the orchard and the path that led to the well. As they walked, James found himself recounting the events of the night before, still amazed by Daisy's behavior. "I've always heard stories about animals with special instincts," he told Lily, "but I've never seen anything like what Daisy did. It was almost as if she understood exactly what was happening." Lily nodded seriously. "Daisy understands a lot of things. She knows when I'm sad, even when I don't tell anyone." They had reached the orchard now, the apple trees looking far less ominous in the morning light. The ground was dappled with sunshine filtering through the leaves, and birds called to each other from the branches above. "Daisy!" Lily called, her voice carrying across the peaceful landscape. "Where are you, girl?" They searched the orchard thoroughly, then headed toward the path that led to the well. James was reluctant to go all the way to the clearing, not wanting to expose Lily to the traumatic scene of the previous night, but she insisted. "That's where we last saw her, Grandpa. She might be waiting for us there." Sure enough, as they approached the clearing, they spotted a familiar white shape near the collapsed sinkhole. Daisy was lying on the ground, her small form perfectly still. "Daisy!" Lily cried, starting to run forward. James caught her arm. "Wait, honey, let me check first." He approached the goat cautiously, fearing the worst. Had Daisy been injured during the rescue? Had she come back to the site of the accident and been caught in a secondary collapse? But as he drew closer, he realized that Daisy was simply sleeping, curled up on the ground, as if standing guard over the place where Lucas had been trapped. "She's okay," he called to Lily, who immediately rushed forward. At the sound of their approach, Daisy raised her head, then stood and stretched, seemingly unperturbed by their concern. She bleated softly as Lily threw her arms around the goat's neck. "We were so worried about you," Lily scolded gently. "Why did you come back here?" James knelt beside them, running his hands over Daisy to check for any injuries. The goat seemed perfectly fine, if a bit tired. As he examined her, his fingers brushed against something tangled in the fur around her neck, something that didn't belong there. "What's this?" he murmured, carefully working the object free. It was a small bronze pendant on a broken leather cord, old and tarnished, with what looked like initials engraved on one side. James turned it over in his palm, trying to make out the faded markings. "J.H." he read aloud, puzzled. "Those are my initials, but this isn't mine. Maybe it belongs to another James Harrington," Lily suggested reasonably. James nodded slowly, a strange feeling coming over him. "My grandfather was also James Harrington, and his father before him. So it could be really old," Lily said, her eyes wide with excitement at the potential mystery. "It must have been buried in the tunnel where Lucas fell," James mused. Somehow, Daisy picked it up. He looked at the goat with renewed wonder. What were the chances that in the chaos of the rescue, she would come away with a family heirloom no one knew existed? "Can I see it?" Lily asked, holding out her small hand. James passed her the pendant, watching as she examined it with childlike curiosity. "Be careful with it. It might be very old." "There's something else here," Lily said, squinting at the back of the pendant. Tiny words. James took it back, holding it up to the light. His eyesight wasn't what it once was, but he could just make out a minuscule inscription along the edge of the medal. "For valor and sacrifice, 1863. 1863, he repeated softly. That was during the Civil War. The significance wasn't lost on him. The Harrington family had deep roots in Virginia, stretching back to before the Civil War. James remembered stories his grandfather had told about their ancestors' involvement in the conflict, though the details had grown fuzzy with time. "We should show this to Grandma Martha," James decided, carefully pocketing the pendant. "She knows more about the family history than anyone." As they made their way back to the farmhouse, Daisy trotting contentedly alongside them, James couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled onto something significant. The pendant, the well, Lucas's accident, Daisy's uncanny behavior. Somehow it all seemed connected in ways he couldn't yet understand. Martha was in the kitchen when they returned, packing a basket of food to take to the hospital. She looked up with relief when she saw Daisy. "So you found our little hero. Where was she?" "By the well," James told her, helping himself to coffee. "Sleeping right next to where Lucas fell. Almost like she was standing guard," Lily added, getting a bowl of water for Daisy, who drank thirstily. James reached into his pocket and pulled out the pendant. "She had this tangled in her fur. I think it might have come from the tunnel where Lucas was trapped." Martha wiped her hands on her apron and took the pendant, turning it over carefully. Her eyes widened as she read the inscription. "James, do you know what this is?" she asked, her voice hushed with amazement. He shook his head. "An old family heirloom, I'm guessing. Maybe belonged to my grandfather or great-grandfather." "This is the Harrington Medal," Martha said, her fingers tracing the outline of the tarnished bronze. "I've heard stories about it my whole life, but I've never actually seen it. It was awarded to Captain James Harrington, your great-great-grandfather, during the Civil War. For valor and sacrifice," James read from the inscription. "What did he do?" Martha laid the pendant carefully on the kitchen table, her expression thoughtful. "According to family legend, he saved an entire patrol that had been trapped in a collapsed mine shaft being used as a field hospital. The story goes that he had a goat, a mascot the soldiers had adopted, that led him to the exact spot where the men were buried." James and Lily exchanged astonished glances. "A goat?" Lily whispered, looking at Daisy with newfound wonder. "History has a strange way of echoing itself," Martha said softly. "The medal was supposedly buried with him, but the grave was relocated. When they built the dam back in the 1940s, no one knew what happened to it after that. Until now," James said, the pieces clicking into place. "The old well must have been dug near where the original grave was located. When the tunnel collapsed with Lucas inside, it must have disturbed the soil enough to unearth the medal. And Daisy found it," Lily concluded, "just like the goat in the story found the soldiers." The three of them looked at Daisy, who had finished her water and was now lying contentedly at Lily's feet, seemingly unaware of the astonishing connection they had just discovered. It was as if a thread had been pulled through time, linking past and present in an extraordinary demonstration of history repeating itself. "We need to tell everyone about this," James said, picking up the pendant again. "Lucas especially. I think he'd like to know that he was saved by more than just chance, that there's a kind of heritage of rescue in our family history." Martha nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Some things run deeper than blood, it seems. Some connections transcend time." As they prepared to head to the hospital to share their discovery with the rest of the family, none of them could have predicted how this revelation would change their understanding of themselves and their place in the long line of Harringtons who had called this land home. Nor could they have imagined the even more extraordinary connections waiting to be uncovered in the family archives, connections that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the bond between humans and the animals that share their lives. The discovery of the Harrington medal transformed what had begun as a frightening accident into something that felt almost preordained. In Lucas's hospital room, the family gathered to share the story of Captain James Harrington and his life-saving goat from more than a century and a half ago. Lucas listened with wide-eyed wonder, the medal now resting in his palm. "So it's like history repeated itself," he said, turning the tarnished bronze pendant over to examine both sides. "Daisy did exactly what that other goat did during the Civil War." "It appears that way," James agreed, still struggling to fully comprehend the coincidence himself, "though I suspect there's more to the story than what's been passed down through the generations." "I want to know everything," Lucas declared, his earlier trauma seemingly forgotten in the excitement of this historical connection. "All about Captain Harrington and the goat and the soldiers he saved." Martha patted his good leg affectionately. "As soon as you're home, we'll dig through the old family papers in the attic. I'm sure there's more information there." "I could help with research," Elena offered. "The County Historical Society might have records from that period." Sarah, who had been quietly absorbing the story, spoke up. "What I don't understand is why Daisy was so focused on finding Lucas. The original story makes sense. A military mascot would be around soldiers all the time, developing attachments. But Daisy only sees Lucas a few times a year when we visit." It was a good question, and one that had been nagging at James as well. The connection between Daisy and Lily was easy to understand. They spent time together during every visit, and the bond between them was visible to anyone who paid attention. But Lucas had never shown particular interest in the goat, nor she in him. "Maybe it has something to do with the medal itself," Michael suggested, ever the practical one. "If it was buried near where Lucas fell, perhaps Daisy was attracted to the object rather than sensing Lucas specifically." "No, but how would she know the medal was there?" David countered. "And that doesn't explain how she led James and Lily directly to the spot where Lucas fell." Lily, who had been unusually quiet throughout the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "I think Daisy understands more than we know. She always has. Like she remembers things from before." The adults exchanged glances, not wanting to dismiss Lily's childlike perception, but also reluctant to venture into supernatural explanations. "Animals have instincts we don't fully understand," James said carefully, "especially domesticated animals that have lived alongside humans for thousands of years." Dr. Mitchell, Lucas's attending physician, had entered the room during the conversation and overheard the discussion. He cleared his throat gently to announce his presence. "Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. You might be interested to know that there's actually quite a bit of scientific research on animal cognition and predictive behaviors. Some animals seem capable of sensing things that humans can't. Changes in air pressure, subtle vibrations, even electromagnetic fields." "Nice. So there could be a scientific explanation for how Daisy found Lucas?" Sarah asked, looking relieved at the possibility. Dr. Mitchell smiled. Science is still discovering new things about animal perception every day. What seems inexplicable now might have a perfectly rational explanation that we simply haven't discovered yet. The conversation shifted to Lucas's recovery, with Dr. Mitchell informing them that if all went well, Lucas could be discharged the following day. He would need to use crutches for several weeks, and physical therapy would follow. But a full recovery was expected. As the family prepared to leave, hospital rules limiting the number of visitors and duration of stays, Lucas held onto the medal, reluctant to part with it. "Can I keep this until tomorrow?" he asked James. "I feel like it's watching over me or something." James smiled. "Of course, it's part of your story now too." Back at the farmhouse, the family spent the evening going through old boxes of documents that Martha had retrieved from the She attic. Yellowed letters, faded photographs, and brittle newspaper clippings offered glimpses into the life of Captain James Harrington, though none provided specific details about the mine shaft rescue that had earned him the medal. "We need to check the county records," Eleanor said, making notes of dates and names, "and maybe military archives could have more information." It was late when they finally called it a night, agreeing to continue the research the next day after bringing Lucas home. Lily, who had been fighting sleep for hours, finally allowed herself to be led to bed, but not before checking on Daisy one last time. The goat had settled into her usual spot near the back porch, seemingly unaffected by her newfound celebrity status within the family. "Good night, Daisy," Lily whispered, stroking the goat's soft head. "Thank you for saving Lucas." The next morning brought sunshine and the welcome news that Lucas was indeed ready to be discharged. Sarah and Michael went to fetch him while the others prepared for his homecoming, setting up a comfortable space in the living room where he could rest with his leg elevated. Lily spent most of the morning with Daisy, who seemed content to follow the child around the yard as she picked wildflowers for a welcome home bouquet. Rebecca watched from the porch, struck by the relationship between her daughter and the small goat. There was something almost profound in their silent communication, a language of gestures and presence that transcended words. "She's special, isn't she?" Martha said, joining Rebecca on the porch with 2 mugs of coffee. "Lily or Daisy?" Rebecca asked with a smile. "Both, I suppose." Martha handed her a mug. "But I was referring to the goat. I've been thinking about your question from yesterday, about why Daisy would have such a strong connection to Lucas when they barely know each other." Rebecca sipped her coffee, waiting for Martha to continue. "I was up half the night, reading through some of James's great-grandmother's journals," Martha said. "Abigail Harrington, she was Captain James's wife. There's a passage where she writes about the goat that saved the soldiers. She calls the animal a guardian of the Harrington line, and mentions a belief that the goat possessed what she termed the sight, an ability to sense when members of the family were in danger." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "That sounds rather mystical for a Civil War-era Virginia family." Abigail was apparently interested in spiritualism, which was quite popular in the late 19th century, Martha explained. "But what struck me was something else she wrote. She described how, after the captain's passing, the goat vanished, only to reappear years later when their grandson nearly drowned in the creek. A different goat, obviously, but with the same distinctive markings, light-colored with unusual eyes." Rebecca looked out to where Lily was carefully placing flowers in a basket, Daisy attentively watching. "Are you suggesting some kind of reincarnation?" Martha laughed softly. No, I'm too practical for that. But I do wonder about genetic memory, the idea that certain behaviors or instincts might be passed down through generations. What if there's a line of goats that has been selectively bred for heightened protective instincts? What if Daisy is descended from that original goat? Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of a car coming up the driveway announced Lucas's return. The homecoming was joyful, with Lucas hobbling in on crutches, proudly showing off his cast already signed by several nurses and doctors. He looked tired but happy, the Harrington medal hanging from a new cord around his neck. The Historical Society is going to help us research Captain Harrington, Elena announced during lunch. I spoke with the director this morning, and she's fascinated by our story. Apparently, there are some Civil War records in their archives that might mention the mine rescue. And I found something else in the attic, James added. An old map of the property from the 1870s. It shows the location of the original family cemetery before it was relocated for the dam project. It's exactly where the old well is now. So the medal really was buried with Captain Harrington, Lucas said, fingering the pendant at his neck. And when I fell, it was like I was meant to find it. Or it was meant to find you, Lily suggested quietly. The conversation continued, with theories and speculations flowing freely, but the central mystery remained. How had Daisy known where to find Lucas? And was it mere coincidence that her behavior so closely mirrored that of a goat from more than 150 years ago? After lunch, while Lucas was resting, James took Lily and Daisy for a walk around the property. The old well had been properly filled in that morning, a crew from the county making quick work of what should have been done decades ago. James had marked the spot with a simple wooden post, planning to create a more permanent memorial later. I've been thinking, he told Lily as they stood looking at the freshly filled hole. Maybe we should write down what happened here. The whole story, from Captain Harrington to Lucas, so it doesn't get forgotten or turned into just a family legend with the details all mixed up. Lily nodded seriously. Like a book? With pictures of Daisy? Exactly like that, James agreed. We could include everything we find out about Captain Harrington and the original rescue too. Daisy, who had been contentedly grazing nearby, suddenly raised her head and trotted over to them, butting her head gently against Lily's hand. I think she likes that idea, Lily giggled, scratching behind the goat's ears. James knelt down, looking the goat in the eyes. You're something special, aren't you, girl? Whatever you are, however you knew, you saved my grandson, and I'll never forget that. Over the next few days, the story of Lucas's rescue and the historical parallel began to take shape. Elena's research at the Historical Society yielded surprising results. Not only were there records of Captain Harrington's medal, but there was also a faded photograph showing him standing proudly in his uniform, a small light-colored goat at his side. The animal's eyes seemed to gaze directly at the camera with an intelligence that transcended the decades. It looks exactly like Daisy, Lucas marveled, comparing the photograph to the goat who had taken to sleeping beside his makeshift bed. In the living room, even the eyes are the same. The military archives provided even more information. The mineshaft rescue had saved the lives of 17 men, including a young soldier who would later become a prominent Virginia politician. The official report mentioned the remarkable behavior of the company mascot, a common goat, which led Captain Harrington to the precise location of the cave-in when no other indicators were visible. With each new discovery, the family's wonder grew. The parallels between the two incidents, separated by over a century and a half, seemed too precise to be mere coincidence. Yet no one could offer a satisfactory explanation for how Daisy had known where to find Lucas, or why she had been so insistent on leading James and Lily to him. On the final evening before most of the family would depart, returning to their lives in Seattle, Chicago, and Richmond, they gathered on the porch as the sun set over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Lucas, his leg propped up on a chair, was animatedly discussing his plans to write a report on Captain Harrington for his history class in the fall. I'm going to include everything, the medal, the original rescue, and what happened to me, he declared. "My teacher won't believe it." "Truth is often stranger than fiction," Michael commented, raising his glass in a toast to the Harrington Medal, lost and found again when it was needed most. Everyone raised their glasses, but James added, "And to Daisy, our unlikely, a guardian angel." As if on cue, Daisy appeared at the edge of the porch, regarding the family with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold secrets none of them could fully comprehend. Lily slipped from her chair and went to the goat, wrapping her arms around the animal's neck in a gentle embrace. "We know what you did," she whispered into Daisy's ear, "and we'll never forget it." In the golden light of the setting sun, with the family gathered close and the ancient mountains standing watch over generations of Harringtons, past and present, there was a sense of completion, of a circle closing. Whatever forces had brought them to this moment, whether divine intervention, genetic memory, or simply the inexplicable bond between humans and animals, had created a story that would be told and retold for generations to come. And at the center of that story would always be a small, light-colored goat with curious eyes and an unexplainable ability to find those who were lost. A guardian of the Harrington line, just as Abigail had written all those years ago. A reminder that some connections transcend time, logic, and even understanding. They simply are, as they have always been and will always be. As darkness settled over the homestead and the stars emerged one by one above the mountains, the Harrington family retired to the house, hearts full of gratitude and wonder. And outside, beneath the vast Virginia sky, Daisy settled into her usual spot near the porch, watchful and content, a silent sentinel guarding the family that had once saved her, and that she in turn had saved in ways that defied explanation. In the years to come, many would ask about the remarkable story of the goat who found the lost boy. Scientists would offer theories about animal cognition and heightened sensory perception. Historians would note the uncanny parallel to the Civil War rescue. Skeptics would dismiss it as exaggeration or coincidence. But those who were there, who witnessed Daisy's determination and Lucas's miraculous rescue, would always know that they had experienced something extraordinary. Something that reminded them of the mysterious connections that bind all living things together across the vast expanse of time. And in the end, perhaps that was the greatest gift of all. Not just the saving of a life, but the revelation that we are never truly alone in this world, even in our darkest moments. That help may come from the most unexpected sources, and that some bonds, once formed, can never truly be broken. Dear listeners, we hope the story of the Harrington family and their extraordinary goat Daisy has touched your hearts. Life sometimes presents us with moments that defy simple explanation. Moments that remind us of the mysterious connections between past and present, and between humans and the animals that share our world. For more emotional journeys like this one, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this tale of remarkable rescue and family legacy, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore life's complexity and unexpected miracles. Don't miss our upcoming content, stories that will move, inspire, and perhaps even change how you see the world around you. We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments below.